Hi, my name is Barry Rose, and welcome to our kind of sneak preview and actually first live and real class of Secret of Vedic Relationship. Calling this lesson The Ocean in a Drop. Like any college class, we always need an overview of what we're going to cover, but rather than, have a wasted first class, there's a lot of things we have to learn in the first class and that, will be important for additional classes. So my first classes are always like chock full, and that's why I called them An Ocean in a Drop. Um, let me hopefully we'll only go about an hour and a half today. Sometimes I'll go over. Those of you for contact information, here it is. Facebook texting does work. I'm, on YouTube, and I have a YouTube channel, Financial Astrology by Barry Rosen. There's about 50 tapes there if you want to get another sample of what I do. Uh, what we're going to do today, I tend to lecture more, particularly on the first class. I will take some questions at the end. During regular class, I do allow my students to interrupt for questions. Usually the classes are small enough that we can do that. But for this class, I will not take questions in the middle of class. I may have a pause and a rest, and I may take some questions then. So you can save your questions for the end. I don't like questions that are like personal, like I've got Mars in, the ninth house. What does that mean? So I don't have your full chart. I can't see everything. So I'm sorry, I can't do those kind of questions. And generally, I send, if you sign up for my classes, I send the PowerPoints ahead of time, even a half hour in advance. I have a revised version. I'm grateful to Raj, who helped me put together. Yes. Okay. Can somebody send Emma the link to get in? Um, I can't do that. I know many of you are in touch with her on WhatsApp. So if you can send Emma the link to get in, that would help her get in. She didn't get, I don't know, somehow she didn't make it on the list. I thought I had given it to her. Anyway, um, um, I do, when you register for my classes, I usually ask for you to send a picture and your birth date if you want me to talk about your charts during class. And we usually have focus time at the end of class to focus on very core questions. All my classes are recorded, and so if you miss a class, you can go to webinar. We'll let you send you a link within 2 hours, and I resend the link, the next day. And I often send the PowerPoints ahead of time. For now, the next class is August 24th. So many of you know me from either my articles or my newsletter or from YouTube. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I've been involved in Vedic astrology since probably 1988, doing consultations starting around 88 or 89. I've been teaching, I used to teach financial astrology, investment astrology, and I'm actually going to do a class this fall, but I started teaching Vedic astrology classes in 2017, and I've been teaching 3 or 4 classes a year over the last 7 or 8 years. I tend to do kind of boutique classes, which are kind of specialized classes on transits and dashas and relationship, or sometimes special topics. We just are completing a whole class on Saturn, and we've done whole classes on Rahu and Mars. So I like to do kind of very focused classes. I like to go deep with people. I've written 5 books, and some of you may have read my books. If not, you might want to pick them up. This is my last book, one I'm most proud of, called Finding Your Blind Spots Using Astrology. It's a Vedic book. It's the 3rd edition. It's on Kindle, and you can get a hard copy on Amazon also. But I'm kind of a scholar and a teacher, and it's my favorite thing to do. Now, this class is not, it is about relationship astrology, but there's a great deal of practical wisdom about relationship also. And I used to be part of a relationship institute. I have Saturn in Libra, which is good for relationship. I've been married 27 years. Um, and uh, you know, basically relationship takes a lot of patience, which is Saturn and Libra will do, and it takes a lot of working together. So that's the value of having Saturn and Libra. But I do feel good about relationship, and I have learned a lot about relationship over the years, and I will share that in the course because I think it's, you know, actually, if for those of you who are astrologers, you also have to be good at counseling people in relationship, which actually there's some skills that we need to learn around that. There's only so much we can learn, but I think it's good. I usually start our classes with um, some Vedic chanting. Basically, the Vedic astrology comes from the Pundit tradition, and the Pundits were the village doctors who would chant mantras and to make sure that they could help people. And this I find that if I do the chants and the classes go well and the consultations go well, and it's really everything. So I always start class with some chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigam Kudame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada, Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa, Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrichoma, Amritam Gamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Vahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And the English translation is very beautiful. Let us be together, let us eat together, let us be vital together, let us be radiating together, radiating the light of light. Never shall we denounce anyone, never entertain negativity. And then the prayer to the planets. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shani Bischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Honoring all the great teachers, got Lord Krishna, an avatar from 5000 BC, Goddess Saraswati, Goddess of Wisdom, Vedavyasa, who's the first cognizer and writer of the Vedas, my spiritual lineage and teacher, and my great Jyotish teachers. There's many, particularly honoring Sanjay Roth and Kamal Sutton and Bill Levesey. We do have 10 people signed up already for the class. It's definitely happening. And Joy is joining us from Israel, although she's in Belgium at the moment. Afi lives in San Diego. Elizabeth is not here, or I hadn't seen her come yet. She lives in Virginia. She's wonderful. Liz is not able to come today. Raj is in Michigan, and Raj helped me put together the slideshow today, so thank you, Raj, for your support. Georgia, I don't know if she's here today. And Christina, I haven't heard from, and Nadine, I haven't heard from, and Alice is here, and Maria's here, and Emma, I was trying to get in. Hopefully she got in by now. I don't know. I know we're working on getting her in. Okay.
I'm here now. Thank you.
Oh, good, Emma. Okay, glad. Okay, so let's start with the main section. For those of you who have signed up for the class, I will send the revised PowerPoint to you after class. There is a third edition now, and I've gotten rid of some of the typos and added some new slides. So that always happens the last minute. So again, I stand on the shoulders of many great teachers, and particularly honoring Camilla Sutton and Hart Defoe and Robert Svoboda, who wrote a book, Light on Relationships. And the best Vedic book on relationship astrology is called The Best Bet, Forming the Right Relationships by Jaya Shankar. He's an Indian astrologer, and he's got 40 years experience. And then I really like the Western astrologers quite a bit, and we will bring a lot of their wisdom in. And in some ways they're better at relationship astrology. Okay. There are many dimensions to relationship astrology. First of all, it can be developing practical skills to do a better job. In other words, counseling couples. Now, we're not, unless you have a counseling degree or you've taken extensive counseling courses on relationship, it's not something you can jump into, but it's good to kind of know a few practical things to do if you're a Vedic astrologer. And you often do get people coming to you, but it does take a lot of skills to learn, and they're worth doing. Other core dimension of relationship astrology is, will the marriage work? Indians traditionally go to an astrologer and say, I want my son and daughter-in-law to, I want my son to marry this girl. Is it going to work? Are they going to get along? That kind of thing. So there's this whole ancient system, which is called the Kuta system, which we'll spend a couple of weeks on, which, actually has scores. And the problem with the Kuta system, it was developed culturally in the Asian cultures because they have arranged marriages and they want to make sure the couple can produce children and continue the lineage. They aren't necessarily concerned about happiness or compatibility. So there are innate problems. You can have a strong Kuta score, but you may hate each other. So, I mean, there are problems with it, but it's good for us. We'll have a couple lessons on it. Modern Western astrologers have done a lot with compatibility and the way planets overlap, and there are these synergy, techniques. And we'll spend the next couple of weeks on looking at, if your Mars and Venus overlap each other, is there passion or is there fighting? There's all these combinations that we have to kind of look at. Then ultimately, there are kind of traditional remedies for relationship that we'll have a lesson on remedies. And a lot of the remedies, sometimes are just giving people practical knowledge on listening and letting go of ego and things like that. And we'll talk about some of those points today. Another part of relationship astrology is if people are getting married, they will come to an astrologer for a muhurta to find an auspicious time. And muhurtas for marriage are particularly complicated. I will teach you all the rules for it, and again, if you don't have a background in muhurta, at least you'll get some basic things. But it takes a. I do plan on teaching hopefully a muhurta course in next January. Muhurta is a very complicated subject, and I'm even I feel competent about it. But teaching the skills about it is very challenging. And then the biggest question that you'll often get as a Vedic astrologer is, when will I meet my soulmate? Which is, or when will I find a relationship, or should I get a divorce? And we have to spend some time on that. And there are other aspects that I'll talk about in a minute. So here's the syllabus, and I have revised it if you haven't looked at the website recently. Originally, I was going to put the course into 2 sections. You can still sign up for the course in 2 payments of $195, but the course has a different order now because I really kind of thought about how we have to do. So today we're going to talk about kind of basic relationship skills and basic aspects of relationship and Vedic astrology, just as an overview. The next couple of weeks, we'll start looking at the richness of Western astrological compatibility techniques, and even we'll look at the outer planets. We can't ignore the outer planets in Vedic astrology just because they're important, and they have a huge impact. And it's just the ancients hadn't discovered them, so they didn't know a lot about them. Even some of the ancients predicted that they would be discovered, and I've written articles about that. Dennis Harness has also. So I do think Western outer planets are important. Planets in composite is kind of how charts overlap, and there are techniques for looking at that, and we'll spend some time on that. Relationship in the houses. So we'll focus mainly on the 4th, 7th, and the 12th houses. Now, most think the 7th house is the most important. The 7th house is really about sexual union and intercourse more than anything. It is about relationship, but the 4th house is about domestic happiness, and it's probably in some ways more important to look at for people. And the 12th house, which completely gets ignored for relationship, is about a sacrificial marriage. It's about it's the house of sacrifice. And I have a 12th house marriage. I got married during a 12th house period. And you know, in traditional Indian cultures, if you marry to produce children, to continue the race, that's a 12th house marriage. In Jaimini astrology, the Upalada is the Aruda of the 12th house. We'll have a lesson on that also. But so the 12th house is often ignored and extremely important. Again, we'll have a couple weeks on ancient systems, the Kuta system, and that's usually a lot of that is about nakshatra agreements. If you're Rohini and they're Mrigashirsa, then will you guys get along, and that kind of thing. But there's a whole there's a lot of Vedic terms that we'll go through, and we have to kind of translate them, but I've kind of mixed them up here. Veda, Dina, Mahendra, Sri Rashi, and all these things. We'll talk about a little bit today just to give you an overview. Then we have what are called Martian blemishes, Kuja dosha. Now, Mars is considered the biggest block in relationship if it's placed in the wrong place. We have to learn all the rules for it. It's not always bad, and it's not bad after age 30 because we usually get over it. But it still boils down to ego is the biggest block to relationship. If you're right and they're wrong, you're just not going to get along, and it drives people crazy. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And Rahu and Ketu are very important in relationship. We've had a lesson on that in the Rahu and Ketu class, and we'll bring some of that in, usually to create very karmic marriages. And then part of this is what I call karmic baggage, and it's something I think it's kind of important topic. Does your partner have too much karma to bring you down? In other words, sometimes you may have compatibility, but if your partner has a lot of difficult karma around finances or health or something, and you don't have any of that, and then you spend all your time kind of taking care of your partner's karmic problems, it really kind of is a lot of karmic baggage, and it really can be challenging. So we'll do that in week 8. Of course, Navamsha, we'll spend at least 2 weeks on Navamsha. It's important, it's extremely important for, we taught a whole class on Navamsha a couple of years back. It's so important. And then, for marriage, it's very important. Jaimini astrology is very important too. We'll look at the Dharkarka, which is the planet with the lowest degrees in your chart, and often is the planet connected to your partner. And then there are other chart karkas that impact relationships. And then we have the Arudas like the A7 and the Aruda Lagna, which we need to spend a lot of time on. So I probably will finally have time to do this. I think it's very important. I love Jaimini astrology, and it's very important in relationship astrology. And then the key question is, how do we time marriage with Rashi and Navamsha chart? That's, the main thing that usually comes up. And I find it very easy to do. And the trick is really kind of getting it right. Then we'll have a week on marriage muhurtas. And again, this is kind of a beginning because there's so much to learn about muhurta, but we'll try to at least kind of scratch out. I'm hoping there are other types of compatibility that people come to you about, gay relationships, parent-child relationships, business partner compatibility. I'm hoping to flesh out a lesson on some of that material. I think it's important. And then finally, we'll get into relationship remedies and practical skills, including sometimes, how do we, there are mantras to attract a partner and pujas that you can do to lift your relationship karma. And then we'll have so the course will probably go 16 weeks. For those of you who've taken classes with me, I always end up adding an extra class. And at this point, it looks like it'll finish in early December. So it's started today officially. It will continue with the next live class in 2 weeks. Okay. Okay. So now I have to bow down to the Western astrologers. They often are so far ahead of the ancient methods. Again, the ancients are interested, can they produce children? Are they going, are they going to get along enough to kind of, keep the family lineage going? And I think even from the Westerners, we find out the outer planets are important. We'll have to do work with that. Now, one of the challenges about relationship astrology is that we have to learn a new charting skill set, because one of the challenges about relationship astrology is that we have to see how two charts overlap, and then we have to interpret them. So in the first, when those of you who started learning Vedic astrology and you learned the North Indian system with the triangles and the diagonals, it was a little challenging, and I even find it particularly difficult to use. Last time I taught the course, I was only using Northern Indian, and it's a bear to use Northern Indian. So I encourage you to use Southern India, but we have to kind of, we'll also even look at circle charts. I'll show you some examples, because you have to see how the two charts interact and how the aspects interact. And then even we have to get to learn how to show how the Rashi chart interacts with the Navamsha chart. So you have a Rashi interacting with the Navamsha chart, and you can have a nice connection there. So there are, that's another level of kind of new charting skills that we have to learn. And then we have to read the Navamsha chart by itself, and understand the ancient methods. So here, classic couple of their chart that worked is Paul Newman and Joanne Woodworth, and they, for a Hollywood couple, they had, they were married their whole life together. They loved each other. They started a huge business together that still exists, Newman Products, and they have, we'll use them a lot for case studies. I'm recommending the Northern Indian chart, and we've got, and the computer software does this. We've got Newman in red. We've got his Rashi and the Navamsha charts in red, and we've got Woodward's, Rashi and Navamsha charts in blue. And what happens is eventually you have to kind of start seeing the relationships between Rashi and Navamsha, and things like that. So there's a whole new skill set that you have to kind of get used to with the way chart. And again, for those of you who don't know South Indian charts, I recommend that you pick them up, because last time I taught this course with the diagonals, unless you can do it, but I think it's very hard, because you can quickly see overlaps in two Rashi charts. So one of the fascinating things about Newman and Woodward is they're both Sag rising, and one of the hallmarks of compatibility is if you have marry somebody with the same rising sign, you're just going to do pretty well, or the same moon signs or things like that. So you can see the overlaps real quickly with the southern chart. You can do it with the northern chart too. Now, then you also have what's called the Varanasi synastry. This is the Kuta system, and they have points. Now, it's interesting. Their point totals are high, 36 and 33. Those are particularly high points totals. And we have to learn all these other little things, Varna, we'll go through these in a little bit too. But there are all these Indian terms from traditional compatibility, and we'll have to learn the Western components and stuff like that. Andrew Frost then shows us the planetary aspects, and he shows the conjunctions, and some of the aspects and stuff like that in another chart. And there are other ways to do this. For example, and I don't have this properly drawn, by the way. This is Newman versus Newman, but you basically the software in the Western chart, the Western software charts do this too. You just show how, okay, in this case, there's perfect compatibility because it's Newman versus Newman. But if we were to put up, I didn't have time to do this properly. In the circle charts, you can quickly see how the planets interact with each other, and you can see how maybe, if her Mars is interacting with his moon or something, what that might create, and we have to learn all those things. So there's a whole new kind of level of technique that we have to learn with charts, and you're gonna have to practice on your own to some degree too, because I can't totally teach it to you, in class. We'll spend some time with it, but not very much. Okay, let's go into basic aspects of relationship and karma. our partners are often tied to past karmic debts. You know, it's very likely that any relationship that you're in, you've had a past life with them in before. And you know, I've done Akashic record readings. You know, my wife and I had been married 5 times, and you know, it was interesting, useful to see what we did to each other in each of those lives, and how, you know, I have to do a better job this lifetime, I think. But anyway, there's usually karmic debt in relationship. Once in a while, I don't. It's hard for me to imagine that two new people who've never been together before, you know, get into a brand new relationship together. But you know, it certainly can happen. Um, you know, sometimes we do have good karma, and we can have a love relationship that works. I mean, as you know, the thing about relationship is it's huge. It's a huge part of our life, you know, whether it's our relationship with our boss or our parents or our kids, or, you know, so there's so many different aspects of relationship, and it boils down to a lot of self-knowledge and good communication skills. And we have to kind of, um, um, you know, we have to kind of not repeat the mistakes from the past. It's a little bit like, for those of you who study with me, I always refer to Bill Murray's Groundhog Day movie from 1993, which is about this boorish weatherman who goes to Puxley, Pennsylvania to film, to see if the groundhog will see his shadow, and he gets stuck, you know, and for 50 nights, kind of waking up and reliving the same nightmare every day. And written by a Zen master who was showing about, you know, it really kind of represents almost 50 lives that he goes through. And by the end of the movie, he's making ice sculptures, and he's a romantic genius, and he wins the girl, and he wakes out of the nightmare. And if you haven't seen it, you have to watch it as part of this class. But you know, basically, how much awareness can we have about our chart or other people's charts so that they don't have to go through 50 lives of doing it right? And the whole point is we got to get it right this time so we don't have to come back again to get it right. Now, you can often see a very karmic relationship. It doesn't have to be a bad karmic relationship. If you have people with Rahu and Ketu on the 1-7 axis, or in the D1 or the D9, and you know, immediately now, Rahu Ketu does not mean that it's a bad relationship either. You know, you may be, you know, Rahu can draw you to another person like glue, and you know, chances are, if you have that signature, you've done it before, and you know, you better get it right this time. But you know, it's something to kind of be aware of. We'll have a whole probably hour on Rahu and Ketu in relationship. And again, is it like Groundhog Day? Are you going to get it right this time? You know, can you have a soulmate relationship because you've learned the basics of relationship, and you've learned from the past? Now, I think, you know, as we know, the divorce rate in the United States is about 50%. You know, you can probably count people that have really wonderful relationships that are friends of yours on one hand. Relationship is, you know, obviously one of the most difficult things, and this is why one of the reasons I'm doing this course was because I also want to help you get a better job with it. And you can sometimes, you can see it in the astrology, but you can also have to have the self-awareness to make a difference. And sometimes, you know, people have strong sexual attraction, but there's nothing else. I mean, I've had the highest score in the Kuta system is like a 4. You know, sometimes if you have the nakshatra animal that are, you know, are 4 compatibles, I mean, you just can't stay away from the other person. But that may not, and some people get married just for sexual attraction. I have a old college roommate who had that kind of score with his marital partner, but they were absolutely miserable on every other level, and I think they got divorced. I mean, but they got together sexually, and the sex worked, but nothing else worked, you know. So there's so many things besides sexual compatibility. Um, you know, we always get the situation where two people with bad skill levels may attract each other and create more unpleasant adventures, and they have to learn how to get it right. So, you know, it's really important to kind of continue to work on that. The key to success is whether partners can commit to cultivating a cooperative state, whether humble devotion and friendship camaraderie, or they let their egos get caught up in them. Obviously, Venus and Jupiter are, Jupiter's the karaka for husband, Venus is the karaka for wife. They're very important to be strong in the charts to even have a chance. But the bottom line is, we learn from Saturn and Libra, patience, humility, devotion, friendship and camaraderie. I mean, and the bottom line is, like, is it more important to be right, or is it important to have a harmonious relationship? Are you gonna make your partner wrong, or are you gonna kind of like get along and just swallow your need to be right? I mean, there's just simple skills like that, but you have to, they're hard. Camille Sutton got this from the Vedic texts. There are kind of 5 traditional Vedic relationships. There's Shanta, having a serene or affection from a partner. Dasya, humble devotedness of a partner like a servant is to his master. I think I have that. Samkhya, the friendship camaraderie of 2 people. I mean, one of my coworkers, one of my employees actually married his best friend, and they had a very strong, and they were friends. They were best friends for before they got married, and they it was the type of marriage that worked really well, because they, the friends marriage work. We often see that in a 311 connection. I'll talk about that in a minute. Vatya, maternal ardor for a parent or for a child. Now, you get relationships that are sometimes like mother-son or father-daughter, and you can see that in the chart also. And those sometimes are more challenging. They can work, but they're more challenging. And then you have Madhura, fervent craving and passion for a lover. Those are these, like, if you get these strong sexual energies together, but there's nothing else, and you just can't stay out of bed with your partner. But that can work, but it also can, if the other stuff doesn't work, it's a problem. And then Virodha, intense hatred, sometimes directed toward God. I mean, that's sometimes if you um, one of the things that we'll have a lesson on, probably about lesson 5, is called the cornerstones of Vedic compatibility. Maybe we'll do it next week. I'll have to see. And you compare the moons and Venus and the ascendants in the 2 charts. So my wife has a Cancer moon, I have a Scorpio moon, so we have a 5-9 relationship, which is good. It's not as good as some of the connections you could have. I mean, the best connection you could have would be 2 Cancer moons or 2 opposing moons, a Cancer Capricorn moon, but a trinal relationship is considered good. When you have a 6-8 relationship, so my wife is a Libra and I'm a Scorpio, and there's a 2-12 relationship, and that's called secret enemies. And there sometimes is a one-sided relationship going on there when you have 2-12s. And then if you have 3-11 compatibility, it's like 3-11 is like a brother, right, or a sibling. 3rd house is younger brother, 11th house is older sibling. So if you have a brother-sister relationship with your partner, and that happens a lot. And it's the 6-8 relationships. You have too many of those. Those are the ones that end up with intense hatred and divorce. And that's, if the moon, especially if the moons are 6-8 from each other, or the ascendants are 6-8 from each other, that's the type of thing. So we'll be looking at that in detail. Now, if you've read my articles on relationship and astrology, the essence, I've learned this from my spiritual teachers, the essence of relationship is that we have to realize that people have a good side and a bad side, and everybody does. Sometimes you meet somebody and you see all their wonderful qualities, and you see they're generous and they're kind and they're compassionate, and then you marry them and you find out they're selfish and they're sloppy and they don't know how to pay their bills on time, but we don't always see both sides, right away, and it's through a long marriage we eventually see both sides. But eventually we have to learn that everybody has a challenging side and a wonderful side, and it's just, they're very, we have, once in a while you get a saint who's perfect, but not really, it just doesn't happen. So we eventually have to accept that people have both sides, and if the positive qualities are stronger than the negative qualities, then we just have to kind of accept them. So the key word with relationship is acceptance, even in, because everybody has both positive and negative qualities. The other big concept in relationship compatibility is the mirror. We tend to attract partners that mirror our qualities, and the question is, if we don't like something in our partner, it's probably something we don't like in ourselves. I mean, unfortunately, for example, I can be a slob and I can be very messy, and I just, I get so busy, and I'm just pretty bad at that. And my wife has a problem with it, of course, as any partner would. But she also is a slob, but she doesn't see that. She doesn't see that side of herself. And so what happens is she's always kind of pointing about my slobbiness, but she doesn't really acknowledge or do anything about her slobbiness. So you see, it's a mirror. You attract a partner who has a mirror. Can you see the fact that the stuff that you're not seeing in your partner is the stuff that you're not seeing in yourself? And are you willing to accept that part of yourself, or are you going to be hard on yourself? So, it's kind of, you probably all know that concept. And the bottom line, of course, which I said earlier about relationship, is acceptance. Is the love strong enough that you can live with the difficult qualities of your partner, or are they just so horrible that you have to break up? And ultimately, if the love is strong enough, you have to eventually get to the acceptance level. Um, I think this idea of relationship for life may be a fairy tale. I mean, we do have grandparents that maybe fell in love in their teens and lived together and died together for 50 years. And it does happen. I don't know if it happens together as much anymore. And it's actually kind of a wonderful thing if it does happen. Um, I think it's important, but I think sometimes there is a time limit on relationships. And I sometimes, we're never in divorce counseling, and you're never supposed to tell somebody to get a divorce, or look at somebody's chart and say, you need to get a divorce. They have to make that decision. It's a huge karmic thing to do with somebody, if you make that decision for them, or if you just say, because people have karma and they have to work it out and they have to make their own decisions. In general, that's what we should do with every decision in Vedic astrology when we're counseling. I can give you this information, you have to kind of decide, make the decision, and but I do think sometimes relationships have an expiration date, and it is time sometimes to move on to another partner. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If usually you have to kind of end it amicably, otherwise, most people who go through divorces, have wounds for 5 years or more, and it blocks you from additional relationships or being in a relationship. So you need to have the skill levels and the counseling abilities and get counseling help to make those things go much more easily. And then we have this whole myth of soulmate in our culture. And if we find somebody just like ourselves, we may run away because the mirror will be too painful for us to look at. We often find that opposites attract. Tauruses and Scorpios, get along well, even though they're very different. Um, um, you have to kind of understand, polarity is generally good, and uh, you know, uh, in terms of relationship synergy, two people with a Cancer moon may do really well together, but a Cancer Capricorn relationship between their moons may work also, because they're very, opposites attract. So again, those are usually the two highest scores for synergy. Trines are probably the third best. The squares are more one-sided, and the 212 and the 6/8 are the three. Sanjay Roth feels like the 311 is the best compatibility, and that's the brother, sister, friend kind of connection. So those are important. Now, in ancient Asian cultures, traditional marriage is about sacrificing children and continuing the lineage. So this is why it's 12th house. It's about sacrifice. If you studied Secret of the Houses with me, 12th house is about sacrifice. And it's not a bad house. It's also about enlightenment. So we have to kind of give something up and let go of our ego to raise our children, and hopefully they will reward you and take care of you when you're old. But you know, this whole marriage and children thing, and this whole is all about perpetuating the lineage. I don't know if people understand that. Our ancestors usually reincarnate in our families, and so and that's because, you know, when people die, they're you know, if they have a strong family connection, their desire is to kind of come back in the family because they don't want to let go of their family. And so grandparents often reincarnate, you know, in their grandkids and things like that. It's very common. And this is actually part of kind of what we're supposed to do. So if you're not supposed to be a monk or a priest, you know, you're actually have some obligation to help your ancestors reincarnate and continue the family lineage. And that's a whole science in itself. By the way, one of the remedies that we'll talk about for a difficult marriage is that often muhurtas aren't done very good, even if you have a marriage muhurta, and most people don't even get one. And you can fix marriage with a remarriage ceremony and an auspicious muhurta. My wife and I did this. I didn't know muhurta when we got married 27 years ago, and I had a colleague do it, and then I looked at it, and it wasn't very good. And one of the problems with marriage muhurtas is that people say, well, my Aunt Bessie can only come in the end of September, and because she only gets 2 weeks of vacation, and we can only get to church on Sunday. You know, what have you got? And you know, you can't always make that work. We're not, you know, the rules of marriage muhurta is that you get married ideally on Fridays ruled by Venus, or Thursday ruled by Jupiter, or, you know, Mercury, or and the moon, and Mondays and Wednesdays are okay, but you never get married on a Tuesday. You never, you know, you never get married on a Saturday. You never get, and you try not to get married on a Sunday, but everybody does because, you know, everybody's off from work. But, you know, so you can fix marriages with a remarriage ceremony. Okay, let's talk a little bit about core planets and relationships. So the moon is always considered the most important in Vedic astrology. We had a whole course on the moon. The moon is mind. It represents happiness, peace of mind. And so moon compatibility is very important in Vedic astrology, and that's why the ancients spent a lot of time comparing muhurta, comparing nakshatras, you know. But so the moon is the most important because, you know, it's the karaka for the 4th house. It represents happiness. It represents domestic life. It represents family life. And so you know, like I said, I think it's more important to analyze the 4th house when you analyze marriage than it is to analyze the 7th house. Um, People of the same lagna, if you marry somebody with the same lagna, you're going to have shared habits. You know, Woodward and Newman were both satirizing. I'm not quite sure. They did develop kind of a philanthropic, it's something that Sages do, organization with Newman, the Newman products that donates all their money to charity. But you know, so if you marry somebody with the same habit, you're probably going to have similar interests, and that's nice. Venus is important for sure desire and sensual gratification. So Venus, of course, is the planet of the senses and sex, and you want, you know, if that's very important to you, you better have good Venus compatibility with your mate, and then you have to look at your nakshatra compatibility, and stuff like that. And the sun is, we used to laugh at, Linda Goodman's sun signs, and Western astrologers like comparing sun signs, but they are important for shared value systems. Like you might, one way of looking at that is, if your shared value systems might be if you don't marry somebody in your same religion, or if you don't have same spiritual or philosophical values, and even political values. Now you can't really marry somebody on the opposite political spectrum without killing each other. So the sun compatibility, is going to show some of that, and it's important. When we look at relationship, we always look at the first and the seventh houses. And whatever planet is in the first house usually desires the seventh house, and so so it's always kind of important, and that's why we have this kind of idea of polarity and opposites kind of working. And the Navamsha chart is is everything, and we spent 12 weeks on it. But if your Rashi chart is not good for marriage, an ideal Navamsha chart may not mean as much. I do have the sense that, and I've done a lot of work with this, when we get married, we become our Navamsha chart, and you can sometimes, if you've done a lot of readings, over the years, I talk about people's Rashi chart and said, well, I did that. I used to be like that. I used to be, by age 36, you're almost becoming your Navamsha chart. And by the time you get married, you're becoming your Navamsha chart too. So there is something to be said about that. But I have seen also where somebody had a difficult Rashi chart and they got married and their life just, and their Navamsha chart was great. And they just became, everything worked in their life, and then they had all the flaws of the Rashi chart come out, and they thought their spouse was having an affair, and they weren't, and they made their spouse miserable, and they ended up getting a divorce, and they went back to their Rashi chart, and their life stopped working. So, there is this funny connection between Rashi and Navamsha in that way. So maybe I say this, but this is traditionally what we teach. But maybe the Navamsha chart can, so for some people, getting married can create a better chart for you, and getting divorced takes you back to where you were. So it's kind of tricky. Obviously, so planets in the 1-7 axis are very important. If you have too many planets in the first house, there's too much self-importance. What about me? What about my needs? And if you have too many planets in the 7th house, you may be too codependent. In codependency, you put your partner in front of your own needs, and you become a doormat, and you become the Stepford wife or the trophy wife, and eventually, those kind of relationships, explode. But sometimes, we always have to look at the 1-7 axis. Houses and relationships. So we'll have a whole lesson on this, but in financial astrology, I talk about every house is connected to finance. We can also see every house. We can talk about relationship also. The first house is, the operating system, and you have to have a solid sense of self to be able to give rather than be needy. So, if your operating system doesn't work, if you have the first lord in the 12th, well, maybe you'll have a sacrificial marriage, but let's say you have the first lord in the 8th, and it's afflicted horribly, and your life is if you don't have a solid self as self, you're not going to be able to give in a relationship. So first house is important. Second house is family, and past family, and obviously we bring our family history into our partners' lives, and that becomes very important. And if you've had a difficult family, you usually bring your parents didn't talk to each other, or get along, or watch TV at the dinner table, then maybe you bring all those bad habits, because that's all into your relationship. So family becomes important. Malefics in the second house are always tricky, always. Third house, people sometimes misteach it as, communications or writing or artistic expression, and those are true, but actually the third house is about the primal mind, which also includes primal sexual desire. Third house is a very sexual house, and if the third house is too strong, we actually don't want Mars in the third house. It's too strong there, it may create too much fighting. It may create too much sexual desire, so you're not satisfied if your partner doesn't give you enough. So third house is important. Fourth house, I think it's a core house. Happiness from family, home unit. Will I be happy? K2 or Mars or Rahu in the fourth house, they're not happy with domestic lives. You don't want to marry somebody with those signatures because unless there's some other major dignity, because they're just not going to stick it out. K2 wants to go off and meditate in the castle. Rahu's always longing for something more, and it's not with the current relationship. And Mars is just wants to fight all the time in relationships. So, definitely don't like malefics in the fourth. Fifth house is a house of romance and children. Malefics cause problems here. They may cause bad judgment in choosing a partner. We don't ever like Rahu, Ketu, or Saturn in the fifth house because the person just doesn't have good judgment and they may choose a difficult partner. And obviously, malefics in the fifth house are or their lords afflicted, going to have problems with children, which is part of family life and becomes a problem. I'm not covering children in this class. I mean, we certainly could have a couple lessons on children, and I don't specialize in that. But I am not covering children in the class. I don't have any children. So there you go, Lord of the fifth and the eighth. Sixth house. Are you disciplined with your health and maintain a healthy body for healthy sexual activity? The sixth house, is also the house of enemies. I mean, put the seventh lord in the sixth and your spouse becomes an enemy. So you're fighting. So, we do have to kind of be aware of those kind of things. Seventh house is, quote unquote, the relationship house. It's also business partnerships. More specifically, it's sexual intercourse. So sometimes, if you have a strong seventh house, you may have a lot of great sexual energies. But if your fourth house is very afflicted, you're not going to be very, very good at domestic life. Eighth house is usually a divorce house. It's also represents partner's money, second from the seventh. So how much money, if you marry, you have a good seventh, you have a good eighth house with benefics in it, like Jupiter. Maybe your partner has a lot of money that she brings to the relationship. Ninth house is Dharma and good luck. It also is the first house. It's the first child for a woman, and the second child for a man. 10th house is mother-in-law. In-laws can, in Indian families, I can't tell you how many consultations I get where the whole consultation is about hating their in-laws and hating their mother-in-laws, and definitely something to be aware of. 11th house, we always say all planets do well in the 11th house, but the 11th house lord is what's called a punishing agent. It's actually wherever the 11th house goes, it tends to create problems. And so if the 11th lord is in the fourth or the 11th lord is in the seventh, it may create a punishing problem for the relationship. So something to think about there. I have 11th lord in the fourth. I've got a Jupiter aspect to it, which saves it. But I have to admit, it's not. I do have some punishing karma going on. 12th house, we said, is an important marriage house. It's about sacrifice in marriage, and do you give up love to perpetuate the race? So, when I see 12th houses, sometimes I get married couples, and the marriage doesn't work, but they love their children, they stick together, and as soon as the children go to college, they get divorced. So in Indian couples, you get a lot of sacrificial marriages, and it's a problem. And it may not create happiness, but it's this whole issue about perpetuating the race, and it's, you have karma to do that for your ancestors. Okay, sun-sign compatibility. I think I just talked about this a little bit. Sharing spiritual, religious, and philosophical values is important. If you don't have that, you can have major fights with your partner. It might be about politics. It might be about they're Jewish and you're Catholic. Maybe something, and it separates. So something to be aware of. It can create struggle. It's something you can get through, but it's all about acceptance. Moon and Venus compatibility. Again, Moon's so important. It's the emotional meeting of the minds. And relationship is so much about emotion, and emotion is so much about happiness, and relationships are about happiness. So you better have good Moon compatibility, and not have their Mars aspecting your Moon. Well, actually, Mars Moon can be good. Actually, it's one of these funny things. There are funny things that we'll learn in the next couple of weeks, but there's Saturn, their Rahu aspecting your Moon, may be pretty difficult. People tend to crave the energies they're lacking. So people are attracted to the opposites or to their lack. So for example, I have a debilitated moon. It's a huge thing in my life. I married a Cancer moon, and I was looking at all the people in my life, and I have so many Taurus moons in my life because I need them to kind of cancel out my Cancer moon. So, we have this whole kind of opposite craving thing going on. So, it's kind of interesting how that kind of can work. And sometimes you have to find a partner who cancels out something that's weak in your chart, and that's one way to do it. Venus compatibility. When two Venuses interact, they get along. They see each other as a vehicle for enjoyment and pleasure. That's a very important part of marriage. It's not something that happens for everybody, but it's usually why people get married. Other planetary alignments. Two Mercury's aligned. So this is a quick look at when we look about how planets overlap each other's chart. So two Mercuries in alignment will often indicate complementary intellectual experience. So some marriages can work really well because the two of you intellectually stimulate each other, and you have these fascinating conversations, and you just that can be a big high for people, especially if you're a Gemini or an air sign, Aquarian. I need that. I don't know. I have it, and I need that, and I don't get it but it's important. Two Jupiters in alignment will create complementary wisdom and knowledge, or shared spiritual knowledge and wisdom. And so that's important. You want your Jupiters to interact. My wife and I, our Jupiters trine each other almost exactly, and our relationship was about our connection to our guru and our service to the guru, and that's why our relationship lasted and worked. We have anyway, two Jupiters connecting may provide comfort to each other. Now, two Mars can complement each other. Let's see, if two Marses, you both have Mars in Aries, and you both like athletic activity and competition and tennis, and so maybe your relationship works because you play tennis together, and that can work for a marriage too. I mean, you just if that's really important to you, it is for Aries, then you marry another Aries and that your Mars are compatible, you do well. Two Saturns may actually rejoice in sharing responsibilities of working with suffering or human tragedy together, or two opposite Saturns may rejoice in cooperating around chores and work. So even though Saturn can be a bummer, I mean, sometimes, my wife and I don't know, our Saturns are in a trinal relationship. Our relationship works because we actually do well with chores and service work together. Two Rahus in alignment may create intense cravings, desires, and deep past karmas. I mean, Rahu's not always, Rahu can be horrible in relationship. It also can be energizing. again, with Rahu's the rock star, and sometimes you get people who are attracted to these Rahu personalities, and they may do something for somebody. It's not bad. Two Ketus in alignment may create deep spiritual devotion, detachment, and may not work. So sometimes Ketu is more of a problem because, relationship is about being together. And if you both just want to go into your separate rooms and meditate and you don't connect at all, it may not work out. Okay. Two approaches to relationship. So our class will focus a bit more on natal chart analysis and how people's natal charts reveal their patterns and skills in relating to others and relating to the world as a whole. So we will do a lot of natal stuff. We will do some synastry. I'll tell you, synastry is tricky, and I have computer problems that I've just bought, Solar Fire and Delanu, and they do such a great job with Vedic relationship stuff that I don't have to work too hard to give people really good information. So I can share you those links. Those programs get very expensive, but if you do a lot of relationship work, you can save a lot of time and give people what they need. So what is synastry in Vedic astrology? Synastry, we transfer the planet of one chart to the other. So if my Mars interacts with your Rahu, forget it. It's going to be, ego battles, violence, anger, whatever. It's just, so one of the things you all have to review is you have to, review your conjunctions. I mean, so if you know, Rahu and what Rahu and Mars mean together, and they happen in synastry, then you can pretty much predict what's happening in two people's lives. We'll do a lot of work on this in the next 3 weeks probably. Like I said, I have computerized programs that do really good jobs now. So if you want one for $29, I do data compatibility programs and can print things out for you. And Delanu is a very expensive program that I've been working with Simon Jalkowski, who's developing a whole matchmaking system based on Vedic astrology. He's done a lot of research, and maybe I can talk he and his partner into being a guest if I'm traveling someday, and maybe they can talk about it. We'll see if we can do that for you. But I'm fascinated by what he's done there. Okay, let's look a little bit at get an overview of the Kuta system, which is what people. Maybe I'll pause for a second here. I will open up. I'm unmuting everybody, so if go to webinar, you have to go under and find your orange mic and turn it green. I will take some quick questions here on anything that I've covered. That again, but don't ask me about your personal chart because I need to see the whole chart. Any answers? Any questions? Any answers? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, Barry. I wanted to ask you, in Western, we find the midpoint between the two
Right.
charts, and it creates a new chart. Do you have that in Vedic?
We don't have that in Vegas, and that's the Davidson technique. I have
Yeah.
software that does it, and I would like to study more of it. And I know it's quite wonderful, and I know the computers do a lot with it. We don't have that in Vedic astrology.
I'm not sure it really works, by the way. I'm not sure, but anyway, yeah, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I actually even took the slide out about it because I bought a bunch of books on it, and I've got the software, and I just, I haven't taken, the 16-week classes on it to feel like I could even begin to understand
Right.
it.
Okay. Okay,
It's
thanks.
like that. Yeah. Other quick questions or answers?
I have a question, Barry. This is Renee.
Oh, good, Renee.
Hi. When you were talking about overlaying the chart, are you putting the planets of both charts together, or the planets from one chart in the other chart's houses and signs? How
Yeah,
did,
yeah, you're doing all of that. Yeah, you're combining the charts, and I don't do too much with the house analysis. Your fifth house interacting with their ninth house. I don't do that. You basically just see how the planets get along because your Mars goes on top of their Rahu or something like that. And you also have to look at aspects. So we know aspects are important. So if your Rahu aspects their Mars, you know, exactly. Usually with aspects, it's a big problem if it's like regular aspects, 1 to 3 degrees, and it's a negative aspect. They're going to irritate you. And we know. So we have to look at aspects too, and the computer programs will do that. And you have to get in the habit of like seeing it also if the computer programs don't do it. Yeah, it's quite this is why relationship astrology can be complicated. And this is why I like the computer programs because they do it all. So that's a nice thing. Okay,
Hey
good
Barry,
question.
it's me, Alice. If you hear noise in the background, it's because I'm at the car dealership. But my question is, do you have any suggestions for compatibility in Vedic astrology software?
Yeah, I will share those with you. Again, they're expensive. I mean, Solar Fire, I think 9.0, or maybe they're up to 10.0. It will use, you can set it for Vedic coordinates and it will spit out interpretation reports and do all kinds of analysis that you kind of need to do. It's expensive. I don't know, maybe I only spent $350 on it. I don't know how much it costs now. Maybe you can get it for $400. Sri Jyoti Star does compatibility. I don't, it's not very user friendly. And then Delanu is this new software by Simon Jakowski. You can go to his website. You can win a free thing from it. It's quite good. I don't know if he's charging like $2,000 for it. It's quite expensive. And it's quite. He's been doing a lot of research with it. I've been taking classes with him about it, and it's quite fascinating. And there are a lot of Western programs that do compatibility. I don't know which ones are better, but the only ones that I use are, I use Solar Flyer because I can get a good interpretation chart. I've sent that to you before, and I do Delanu now, but I don't have any other ones. I use Andrew's program, and it's not user friendly, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I
Thanks,
don't
Barry.
know about Parashara's Light. I don't know how good it is for compatibility. Affy, is it any good for compatibility?
Not really. I
Yeah,
mean, it's okay. It's
okay.
okay, but it puts, the two charts on top of each other and you have to kind of figure it out. But it doesn't do anything sophisticated.
Okay. Yeah, so software is a huge problem. I mean, if you're a Vedic astrologer and you want to develop your skill level with this, you have to put out a lot of money. I don't know any way around it. You can do it by hand. But as you know, regular astrology is hard enough, so we can imagine doing two charts and their interactions is a whole new level of complexity, and that's one of the challenges. Okay. So the Kuja system, which we'll have a couple lessons on, is the ancient system for deciding if, and traditionally in India and other Asian cultures, the parents get together with somebody else's parents, and one has a boy and one has a girl, and let's get them married and have grandchildren. This is still a very common practice in Asian cultures, and it can be a disaster if they don't get a good Vedic astrologer, and then even when they do a Vedic astrologer, the Kuja system is limited. It may say, okay, your marriage is going to survive and you're going to have children, but you may not love each other. So I get all these problems I get all these Indian couples that have these horrible marriages, and they're stuck because they have children, and you know, they're not happy. So it's kind of a mess. But there are all these kind of scores. Well, I'm not going to go over this now, but there's all these things that you can look at. A lot of the Kuta system is comparing the nakshatras of the moon, and there's all kinds of these hidden calculations that you do with them. There's a Yoni Kuta system, which is about sexual compatibility. You know, the nakshatras all have animals. So like the worst combination, if a Mrigashirsa moon marries a Rohini moon, it represents the animals are the male and the female snakes, and it's the worst, you know, combination for mating, you know. So, you know, if you get a cat and a rat mating, it's really interesting. The animals I'm not going to do anything with this. I can steer you toward it, but there's a whole system of animals and sexual mating with animals and their symbolism in Vedic astrology, and I don't know what to do with it, but I don't. I could send you to people who, if you want to study it. This is Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman's Varanasi synastry chart, and we'll have to learn all these terms. Varna usually means caste. So if two, and both of them are, so here's Paul and here's Joanne. Ideally, you want to marry somebody from your same caste. So if two university professors get married to each other, which often happens, they're both Brahmins, they often get along because they're just intellectual and they both teach and they're both into knowledge and they watch the Discovery Channel together. You know, there's some automatic, you know, synergy that happens there. And when you get kind of class incongruities, it may not work, you know. You know, if you're a university professor and you marry a lady, you know, a Shudra who works in a shoe store, you know, you may not have anything important to talk about with your partner, you know. So that's called Varna. And there are all these other things that we have to learn. Yoni is the sexual compatibility. Their score was only a 1, which is probably low. You can have 0 to 4. He's a horse and she was a lion. The Gana system is connected to the nakshatra. There's 3 temperaments. There's kind of the angels or the devas, you know, we might use the word, there's the humans, and then there's the rakshasas, the demons. And they were, you know, certain combinations don't work. If a deva marries a rakshasa, you know, you're too pure and spiritual and you're marrying somebody who's selfish, you know, it doesn't work. So maybe they got a strong score of 6 because they were both Rakshasas. And Rakshasas doesn't mean they're demons. They just maybe have a certain, you know, they're Hollywood movie stars. They have certain personalities, you know. You know, there are all these things that we'll learn here. It's quite fascinating. I don't want to go over it now, but this is the ancient system. And, you know, the computers will give you the scores. I don't always pay attention to them, but it's important. Sometimes it's important. There's certain things that you see in them that are important to know. We'll go through that. It's in the slideshow. You know, in general, with relationship astrology, we want to avoid good and bad analysis. You know, and I think for my students, you know, who take my basic classes, I always say, we never use the word good and bad when we're talking to somebody, you know, and people will sometimes ask, is that good or is that bad? No, we have to be specific. You have Mars in the 4th house. You tend to want to fight in relationship, and you're going to have to learn to harmonize at home and give in to what you don't want to do to make the relationship work. You have to be specific. You don't just say, oh, you've got Mars in the 4th house, you're doomed. You know, how is somebody going to feel? No, you have to be specific, and we have to learn all the languaging to be specific, and that's, you know, what relationship astrology requires. Ultimately, you know, good relationship is all about communication and listening. You know, if you don't listen to your partner and you talk over them, and if you don't let them talk and you don't listen act when they tell you, you know, they tell you what they're feeling, you're going to get into trouble. You know, so you know, ultimately, and people ultimately have to take, you know, if our parents didn't teach us this, if we're not very good at it, if we've got a very afflicted Mercury in our chart or something like that, we may be in trouble, and we've got to kind of, you know, 3rd and 11th houses are connected to listening. You know, if they're very afflicted, maybe we just don't ever listen, you know, so there's things that we have to learn. We always have to let go of ego and being right. So the cardinal problem with relationship is I'm right and you're wrong, you know, and that's ego. And we know, we all hate people like that, right? And you get extreme examples of this sometimes, and those people end up running for the hills because, you know, again, this is we had that lesson on Mars and the 12 levels of ego. Excuse me, I need some water badly. Hold on a second. Okay, so you know, relationship always boils down to letting go of ego. You know, I want this, you want that. How do we compromise? How do I say yes? You know, one of my spiritual teachers said the secret of relationship is saying yes, even though you might disagree. Say yes, and then maybe a half hour later say, well, is it really a good idea, honey? I think we have something scheduled on Saturday. If we really go to that movie you want to go to, I think we're going to really upset our friends, you know, or something. So you've got to, it's all about languaging and learning how to compromise and learning how to kind of say yes and not, you know, say no. You know, that destroys relationship. We have to be willing to compromise. You know, people who are not in relationship are often not willing to compromise because they just want to do it their own way, and they don't want to have to go through that dance. And you know, it depends. Do you want harmony? Do you want to be, or do you want to be alone? You know, it's you know, it's a real dancing act. You know, good couples always have to have regular date nights to break up, you know, just having to work together with the kids, or, you know, so you have to keep the romance going in relationship. Otherwise, you know, it's going to die. You have to, you know, have a vacation with each other. I mean, Bonnie and I work so hard we don't see each other, and you know, I've been doing these trips abroad because we have intense time together, you know, 24 hours a day, and it really kind of cements us. So, you know, you always have to kind of do things to kind of keep the romance going. You know, and you have to even get together and remind each other that you cherish and appreciate each other. And we just completed a new relationship class, and we have this new candle ceremony, and we have to do that, you know, to keep the connection going. I think, I do think that relationships do have an expiration date. And I talked about a little bit about this, and you know, we never recommend divorce. We never recommend divorce when we're doing relationship compatibility with anybody. People have to come make those own decisions because it's a huge karmic thing, and particularly when people have children, it's really a huge karmic problem if you break the marriage and your children get separated and get caught in the divorce. And you know, you all know stories and families where this goes on, and this is why you go to a relationship counselor. This is why you learn new skills and communication skills, because you've got to protect your family and your children. So you know, at some point too, your children, you know, go off to college and they're grown up, and you hate your spouse, you know, maybe the expiration date is up, and it's time to move toward what you want. But you know, it's something you have to kind of really kind of figure out. You know, business relationships have an expiration date too. You know, and I think fixed signs may be a little bit more stuck. You know, they don't like to change things. Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius. I mean, I'm a fixed sign. I've been married 27 years. I don't like to change things. So I've been in the same job for 35 years. So you know, those kind of things can have an impact. Now, whether that's good or not, I don't know. Our partners should teach us something about ourselves that we're not able to see, and sometimes it's painful. And if you think changing partners and looking into a new mirror is going to suddenly, change things, you're wrong. Usually if you have problems with one partner and you switch, you usually have the same problems with the next partner. And it's just because you're not seeing those parts of yourself that you don't like. Saturn has Digbala in the 7th house. So Saturn, the only planet that does well in the 7th house is Saturn. We don't like any other planet in the 7th house. We'll go through that in a minute. And Saturn in Libra is the 7th sign of the zodiac. And so both of those combinations are particularly good because we know that relationship is a long, drawn out event. And Saturn in Libra has the patience to work on it. And most people, if you don't have a strong Saturn, you have a very afflicted Saturn, you're pretty impatient, you're going to jump ship. So you need, that's why Saturn can be helpful in relationship, because you have to kind of know it's a long maddening dance that takes a lot of shadow dancing and reconciliation and not blaming the other person, and you have to take responsibility, otherwise you're going to suffer. There's a lot of suffering that happens in a relationship, and it doesn't have to be there, but you have to kind of learn about letting go and not being right and taking responsibility for when you're wrong and making up and saying you're sorry and simple things, but people don't do them. Everyone knows that Venus, love, and relationships are connected to the 7th house, but the key to the 7th house is self-love. If we can love ourselves enough, then we can put up with our partner's imperfections. So, if we don't, that's why I said the 1st house, if our operating system is defective and afflicted, if we don't love ourselves, we're certainly not going to have trouble. We're not going to have trouble with our partner, right? Because we're hard on ourselves, we're hard on our partner. It's the same dance. I have an exalted Saturn in Libra. It's in the 12th house, and I have incredible patience in marriage, and in my marriage, and I feel blessed in that way. And my dad was married his whole life, and I feel lucky that and I know I still have huge relationship issues that I'm always dealing with. I think most relationship issues, are a lifetime, and I don't think, jumping ship and changing, is not always the answer. So the 7th house is a kama house of desire, but the secret is to move beyond self-gratification and personal need to unconditional giving and love to our partner. So, even, all the sex counselors, it's not about your gratification, it's about giving to your partner. So, eventually you've got to, it's not about you, it's about what can you give in the relationship on whatever level. This is a really advanced point, but the 12th house is actually a sexual house, but it's also the house of liberation and enlightenment. And it's very interesting because a good partner can take you to God and liberation, but getting to that level with your partner, in a beautiful sexual relationship is quite a monumental task sometimes. Ultimately, the final goal of marriage is to find God in our partner, and to find our partner to find God in us. And this is many lifetimes of dance until the final marriage unites us in our true partner, which is the divine. When we think about Libra, which is the natural 7th house of the zodiac, and it's all about learning to share and not to be selfish, and with the opposite of Aries, which is so ego-based. And I have Mars in Aries, and I always want to do everything alone. And my wife is Libra rising with Jupiter in there, and she wants to do everything together, whether it's doing dishes or cleaning the house or whatever. If we don't do it together, it's not, forget it. So sometimes you have this dance, when you have these opposites, and it's really kind of learning to say yes and compromise. Relationship is about support and sharing and finding someone who validates our existence. When we find that person, it leads to self-discovery. I exist and I have meaning. You know, we have to listen to our partners. We have to validate them. We have to be there to support them in their troubles, and we have to not analyze them. Sometimes we just have to listen and hold and love. You know, it's really not about, you know, fixing them. You know, sharing is so important in our lives. Think about what's happened with Facebook. You know, it's just exploded because, you know, you know, how many people want to be liked? You know, our partner, you know, if our partner doesn't like us, you're in real trouble. You know, you go to Facebook, I got 30 likes today, but you know, it really, you think how important it is. You know, you have to tell your partner every day something special about themselves. What, you know, how they moved you, how, you know, what they, you know, how they're contributing to your happiness. You know, you have to compliment your partner. You know, don't take them down. Yeah. Seventh house again is marriage and business contracts. You know, we'll look at planets in the seventh house. You know, so often when we get planets in the seventh house, we get problems with business partners also because there's you know, there has to be this trust. I mean, seventh house is also business contracts and business partners, and if you know, usually if your relationships don't work, your business relationships aren't going to work either because it's the same house. Again, the Navamsha chart may be different, but something to kind of think about. Okay, we talked about Libra in the seventh house. We talked about Kama house. You know, again, seventh house is a Kama house, so it's about feelings and thoughts and intimate desires that have to be shared. So very important. You know, if you're a man and you're shut down and you're not able to do that, you have to learn how to kind of do that. Seventh house is also about enemies and competitors. Kind of interesting in sports astrology. You look at the stronger of the first and the seventh house to see who's going to win the game. But you know, in relationship, you don't want to get in an adversarial situation. I win, you lose. I'm right, you're wrong. You know, it's about creating something bigger. First house is sunrise. Seventh house is sunset. Think about that. In the darkness of the seventh house, we lose our identity and merge. You know, it's, you know, when you studied seventh house with me, you know, it's just planets are pretty kind of dead there. You know, it's a Marika house. It kills you. If your relationships don't work, they kill you, right? So, but the secret is the merging in the seventh house, which can create something bigger. One of my friends at our wedding kind of said, he's a good businessman, good Capricorn, and he would say, you know, when I make business deals, it's not just 2 and 2 is 4. It's I want a business deal where 2 and 2 is 7. A good relationship, you know, if there's really good compatibility, it creates a sine wave amplification. If you remember your physics, you have these sine waves, and you know, if you energize them the right way, you get a bigger sine wave, right? And so when you have two sine waves getting bigger in a relationship, you know, something bigger happens. And, you know, ideally we want that. You know, the opposite is you get a sine and a cosine wave, right? You cancel each other out and you get nothing, and just, you know, you're unhappy, you know, because you know, I'm right and you're wrong, and that's sine cosine. You know, and that's the Marka aspect of the seventh house. You know, it's the killer aspect of the seventh house. Does your relationship create illness? Does it create suffering? Or is it you know, is it amplifying? You know, the secret of relationships, you know, partners think that if I could only change my other partner, I would, you know, everything would be fine. If you would only change this quality, the relationship would work. And people will hang on for 20 years still thinking that their partner will change. And, you know, I tell people, I say, people usually don't change, and you get what you pay for, and you better accept that, otherwise you're going to be miserable. And when we try to change people, it gets worse. They hate it and they rebel. You have to accept their imperfections, and there are ways that you can help correct them, but it takes a lot of it takes love and not rejection and not criticism. Let's see. If your partner provokes a strong emotional response, they are beckoning us into the shadow dance to discover our own imperfections. The key is to invite them into your own life, to create your own scavenger hunt, to discover your own imperfections. Embrace the complaints and have fun on the hunt. You may find buried treasure. So this is the whole mirror thing. I mean, if you get critical and start getting into imperfections, and don't see that the mirror of their imperfections are showing you your imperfections, and that your partner is showing you the darkness that you don't want to see, then you move on and you never see your own darkness. Embrace the treasure hunt. Secret of the seventh house is to let go of being too critical. Again, Venus is debilitated in Virgo because its loving nature, which is unconditional, and Pisces gets lost in analyzing and being too picky. So if you have Venus in Virgo, you have to just, accept, otherwise you're going to die. Again, ultimately, we have to be kinder. If we're critical of our partner, we're critical of ourselves. So we have to kind of praise ourselves so that we can praise our partner. And by praising your partner, you end up praising yourself. So, our true soulmates are our own soulmates, The second house beckons us into the land of Oz, an exciting foreign place of dreams and hopes of exciting foreign territory. It's a place of opposites, and if we do not embrace the thrill of that foreign territory, then we'll be hopelessly trying to find our exact carbon copy. So this is the whole idea of opposites attract. Sometimes we go for trying to find a relationship of somebody exactly like us, and sometimes it's totally exciting. Sometimes I go to conferences and I meet people that are completely different, and there's some magic that happens because they're so new and different that I enjoy, learning about them and appreciating them. So I think that's really important. People come with both sides of the same coin. You may see the head. We talked about this at the beginning of the talk. Everybody has a good side and a challenging side, and you have to accept both, otherwise you're going to be miserable. Okay, planets in the seventh house. Any quick thoughts or questions before I move on to this section? We're going to end soon because I try to end early at the promos.
Barry?
Yeah.
Hi, Barry. I have a quick question in regards to cheating. It's some kind of topic. Like, is Rahu the marker for that, or should we look at seventh house pattern? Just general question.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
Oh, I wonder what is the marker for like spouse unfaithful behavior, like cheating or that type of
Right,
relationship issue.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit in the course. I mean, more. Yeah, Mars and Rahu is definitely going to create a cheater. That's what it does by nature. Mars, if it's afflicted,
Right.
will also often create a cheating personality. Debilitated Saturn can too, because it can be a thief too. So I mean, there are, Mercury is the prince. If it's immature and it doesn't have any dignity, it tends to be rather immature in relationships, and it will also engage in adultery. Venus can be too amorous. All the planets can be cheaters. If they're afflicted and they're in the wrong places.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's look at. I said no planet's considered good in the seventh house except for maybe Saturn. And even Saturn can bring up a cold relationship if it's in the wrong sign. But so the sun, Sun in the 7th house creates, again, Sun doesn't want to be in the 7th house because the Sun, that's sunset, right? It's not happy. It's dead. I always teach, planets in the 7th house are dead. Their energies are totally distorted. So Sun in the 7th house wants to fight. It creates marital disharmony. Can create distance in a relationship because there are ego problems. Moon in the 7th house can create fickleness because Moon changes so much. Relationships on and off too much. Mars in the 7th house can lead to divorce if it doesn't have dignity. We have a whole lesson. There's a lot of exceptions. Mars in the 7th house is not always bad, but it is one of the more problematic things in relationship. It can lead to adultery. Mercury I just talked about, is rather immature in relationship. It represents the prince who likes to go to bed with all the chambermaids in the king's castle and eventually, has trouble being mature about relationships. So Mercury is pretty immature in the 7th house. Jupiter and Venus can't even create affairs in the 7th house. You would think, even Venus in the 7th house is considered that, Princess Diana has Venus in the 7th house in Taurus, and she was adulterous and she attracted a husband who was adulterous. It's almost too much. It's considered karka bhavo nacha. You don't want the karka in its own house. That Venus in the 7th house actually can do that. Jupiter in the 7th house, you would think would be okay, but if it doesn't have any dignity, it can also have the same problem. Rahu and Ketu bring up very karmic issues. We'll have a whole hour on Rahu and Ketu on the 1-7 axis. Just really unconventional relationships, difficult partnerships, codependent, dependent relationships. I call it the rock star. Fan syndrome. Rahu's the rock star. If it doesn't have a fan who's willing to devote his life to the rock star, the relationship won't work. And Saturn, Saturn in the 7th house, is considered the best. If it's afflicted, it may create a cold marriage, or it could create a marriage that is about chores or working together or something. So it will last, it will do the best, but it's not like it will necessarily be fun. Okay, I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can read the notes. Again, those of you who study with me, I often give you a lot of material, but I don't go through it in class because I call it cookbook material. You read through it, but these are all the planets in the houses in more detail, and if there's dignity or not dignity. So we have to remember, whenever we even evaluate any planet, even if it's nothing's considered good in the 7th house, if there's dignity, it may do better and have some saving grace, like Sun in the 7th house if it's in Aries, or if it's in Hitler had Sun in the 7th house, but it was kind of a disaster. But he was a great leader. I don't know. Jupiter ruled Sun in the 7th house, and Jupiter ruled signs may have command in relationship. And, again, certain, if there are benefics helping it, it may help. So you can read through all of these at home. And the appendix, for those of you who take the class, also talks about planets by what sign owns the 7th house. It tells you a lot about the nature of your relationships. We should go through this maybe later in the course when we do more stuff like this. But I think it's good to understand this and the nature of each sign and how it shows up in relationship. And it's quite fascinating. You can read through it also. Again, I can't always go. Like I said, ideally, I need to. When we have our classes, we have a lot more time with case studies, and we have to really kind of do a lot with case studies in your charts to kind of make all this stuff come alive. But you can read the main points and go through them. Okay, there's more stuff here, but I'm running out of steam and you probably running out of attention. So let me take so the class I have 9 people. I have 10 people signed up already. My classes tend to be small, which is nice. You get a lot of attention. The next class will be, I'm just trying to get to the other slide. I'm sorry. So here's my contact information. You can email me if you have any special needs. For those of you who are watching the videotape, you will get a notice from GoToWebinar, which will tell you how to sign up for the class. If you go to my website under appliedvedicastrology.com, if you click on live webinars, you'll see the relationship course. It's $349. If you sign up before the course starts, usually I have the early bird usually ends a few days before. If you want to do 2 payments, there's a 2 payment option on the website. It says part 1 and part 2, but you can do that also for those of you who need that kind of option. But most people get payments out of their credit cards. If you need a PayPal payment option because you don't have a credit card, I can work that out with you also. And if you have any special needs, please talk to me. It's not like I make a lot of money teaching these courses. And I do it because it's my passion and it's my favorite thing to do. So anybody who's studied with me before, if you want to share any experience taking my classes with people who don't have that experience, so anybody would like to share? Anybody have any?
So, go ahead.
I'm done. I'm good.
I guess I'll go first, like I always do. Sorry, Barry. I've been studying with Barry. I guess it's going on, I guess it has to be 4 years, I would imagine. I'm a Western astrologer, and your classes have been absolutely breathtaking for me. Listen. There's a tremendous amount of information. You send these fabulous PowerPoints that I keep, and so that I can always go over them because it's really difficult to remember all the stuff, but you always have a possibility to go over them and to integrate them into it's fantastic. I love the way you teach, and also I like the fact that you bring in everybody's chart, and especially people who have particular configurations that you're talking about, and nobody ever gets passed over. It's a pleasure and it's a privilege to be able to study with you. So.
Okay, thank you, Joy. That was great. Yeah, it's been really great having your Western background in my class too. I'm really contribute a lot. Thank you. Any other old students want to share anything?
I'll go ahead. I'm going to add to Joy what Joy said, and I'll add to her statement as well. What I like about your class is that you encourage class participation. I think most students, like myself, learn from practice. So it's not just theory and lecture. It's actual practice with charts, different people's charts, celebrities' charts, but also our classmates' charts as well. And I think that's extremely helpful. And you allow us and you're very encouraging in that sense. So I appreciate that. And again, this is all added to what Joyce says as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Effie. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, hey Barry, it's Alice. I just wanted to say thanks because a lot of the analogies you gave during the class were very helpful, as you know my compatibility with my partner. So it's great reminders to just be accepting, and I really appreciate that. So I want to say thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I just want to remind people. This is not one of the reasons I'm teaching this class is because relationship is such a huge challenge in our society at the moment, and you know, the astrology, understanding the astrology is one thing, but we also have to have the skill level to maneuver and make it work. And that's, I'm hoping and I brought in a lot of those points today, and I'm hoping to continue to do that throughout the whole course, because that's one of the reasons I'm teaching it. It's not, you know, I think it's not just about, you know, saying, you know, even traditional Vedic astrology is just saying, oh, you've got 33 points, you should get married. You know, that doesn't even work. But it's kind of like, you know, we love each other, it's not working, what do we do? You know, sometimes you can learn to see the flaws in the two charts and to make it work and stuff like that.
Yeah, the rock star analysis really works.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes, I mean, so I had taken a seminar with Sanjay Rath on relationship, and he had some, you know, he had some simple things, you know, like I have a 2-12 relationship between Libra and Scorpio with my wife, and he said you just have to kind of make sure that you know, have a daytime together. You go on trips together regularly, and you know, he's absolutely right. It just totally kind of changes everything. You know. Okay. Anybody else want to share anything?
Hey Barry, it's Tahia. I'll share, and just, you know, to echo what everybody else said as well, that you really create a great environment for being able to ask questions and repeat concepts, which I totally appreciate. And I honestly don't know how many years it's been that I've been taking your classes, but they've all been super insightful and just very, very helpful. So thank you for that, and thanks for continuing to share.
Okay, good. Yeah, just what I have to do. We'll see, as long as I can do it, as long as the internet works. Otherwise, you'll have to come to Iowa. Okay, any other final comments or questions? Renee, you have your hand up. Let me unmute you. I'm sorry, I think you're unmuted now. No, you're okay. Self-muted and it's muted. Let me see if I can. Okay, there you go. You're on. Renee?
Yes. Yeah, sorry about that. I had the hand up from earlier, but I did want to ask, will this class be in this GoToWebinar format?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and you had trouble with that last time, and I'm sorry. We can work out the technical difficulties. I don't like Zoom as much because GoToWebinar does a lot more things for me, and I know you've had some problems with it, but we can work with technical support to make sure that you don't.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Barry, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
I count as newbie to your class and just to Vedic astrology in general. I'm amazed every single class by the amount of knowledge that you have, and every single time you will share the presentation before, and you're very responsible and responsive when we have you know, like questions. And I just really appreciate that. And I feel like every presentation you gave us is like a book. Yeah, I keep them because it's just vast of knowledge. I'm still just amazed, and yeah, like I mean, wow, all the time, like every time I take your class. That's why I decided to continue. It's not only just because of the knowledge, but also I feel like you have a lot of experience and some you know, spiritual teachings that you integrate in your presentations is also very beneficial. And you as a person, I just really like the style you're teaching and the things you preach. Yes, so that's why I'm here, and
Thank you.
highly recommend people signing up.
Great. Thank you, Emma. Good to have you. You've come so far so quickly. It's like good. I want to thank Raj. Raj did the artistic organization and of the slideshow and helped me get that together. And I think he's going to be continuing to help throughout the class, and I think that'll be nice. So thank you, Raj. Did you have any quick things you wanted to say? Maybe he had to go. Okay. Okay, so for those of you, many of you will be, most of the people who came actually have signed up for the class already, but for those of you who missed the presentation and are getting the video, I do encourage you to study with me, and if you have any special needs, just email me at my personal address, swford@gmail.com, and visit the website for the full syllabus again. Okay, so I will end the presentation, and thank you all for coming. For those of you in Secrets of Saturn, we are not having a live class next week. I will send you a videotape on Saturn and health, which you can study on your own. I will have a 1-hour wrap up for the whole class at 3 o'clock on the 24th, which will be, 2 or 3 hours after we finish lesson 2 of relationship. So double header coming up on the 24th, but we'll just probably meet for an hour. Okay. See you guys in a couple weeks. Take care. Bye.